We were talking last time about SIDS and why children sometimes don't survive. We're going to talk about other problems now, not for very long. It's kind of a sad subject. After the neonatal period, death due to injuries are the third leading cause of death after SIDS and birth defects. Um, just under one quarter of the injuries are intentional. This is also known as homicide. The leading cause of death by injury is homicide. The baby being murdered by someone. Sometimes it's mom or dad. Sometimes it's a boyfriend or a stepfather. Um, it's just what happens, unfortunately. Other leading causes of death include suffocation, motor vehicle accidents, or choking on food or other objects. According to Piaget, you'll remember there's three different major uh, theories as to how children develop. One is by Freud, of course, and we're not really going to talk about Freud. The other two are by Erikson and Piaget. Erikson, of course, deals with the social aspect of a child and how they develop, and Piaget talks about the cognitive aspect of a child and why they develop. So, according to Piaget, a child is born with all of its senses primed to take in new information. The baby organizes all the incoming data in the form of schemes that are added to and changed with new information. Of course, a scheme would be I am uncomfortable because I have made a mess in my pants. If I cry, then somebody comes and changes my diaper, and now I'm nice and dry, and I'm nice and warm, so I don't cry anymore. That would be a scheme. Another scheme would be I'm hungry, my stomach is empty, or at least my idea of whether it's empty or not. I want to eat, so I cry, and I cry in a specific manner so that my mother knows that I'm hungry, and she comes and she feeds me. Another one would be I'm lonely and I'm a little bit scared. There's nobody around and I'm bored. I need somebody to be with me, so I start crying, and then somebody comes and picks me up. Those are all schemes, and they're primary schemes of newborn babies. Right after birth, the newborn must operate in its world using its senses and its motor skills. This stage Piaget referred to as the sensory motor stage. So, right after birth is Piaget's sensory motor stage. The newborn will try to understand the world using its senses, especially its mouth. And as far as the baby is concerned, and of course Freud said this too, the first stage that the baby goes through is the oral stage, where everything goes into the baby's mouth. They taste everything. They'll put anything in their mouths. If they can pick it up, they will taste it, including your fingers. So be careful. This stage runs from birth to about age 2. There are simple reflexes that the baby has. The infant's first interactions with the world are through reflexive behavior. It's hungry, the mother's nipple is there, and it starts the rooting reflex. And we have anthropological psychologists have thought about this, and one of the reasons they think that the mother's nipple is a different color than the rest of her breast is as so that the baby can see it. Now you have to remember that the baby doesn't have 20/20 vision until about age 6 months. So right after it's born, it's looking for something, or it only sees light and dark, doesn't can't really focus very well. And since the mother's nipple is darker than the rest of the mother's breast, the baby sees it as something to latch onto, or it sees it as something that it can identify, and that may be one of the reasons why the areola of a woman's nipple, or of a man's nipple, for that matter, nipples are darker colored than other parts of the body. and it makes it stand out. And if, well, we won't go into that. After about 1 month, the infant will begin developing habits and circular reactions. A habit is a scheme based on a reflex that becomes separated from its stimuli, sucking when a nipple isn't present. Circular reaction is a repetitive action, and of course, the baby will tend to do the same thing over and over again because it wants a specific reaction from the mother or from the caregivers. An infant will begin participating in primary circular reaction. The infant will use its body in a repetitive manner. This is my grandson again. As you can see, he's got soccer socks on, and I guess the basketball socks. My daughter wanted him to be an athlete, and he is kind of an athlete, I guess. He has a soccer game and a basketball game tomorrow, so we'll see what happens. At about 4 to 8 months, the child will begin participating in secondary circular reactions. The infant will go outside itself for stimulation, and this is when they will pick up something and like a rattle, something that makes noise. So the baby will make as much noise as looking for stimulation, of course. And this is known as a secondary circular reaction. Between the 8th and the 12th month, the infant will begin coordinating its secondary circular reactions. The infant will begin mixing and matching its exploration of its environment. And this is my grandson again, and he's got that nifty little toy, and it's got things that move and things that make noise. And as you can see, he's carrying his drink with him. This is him down in Florida. It also moved, so he could push it along, or he could play with whatever was there. You can see there's a telephone right here. There's his drink, spilling it all over the floor, and I think he has spilled it all. Yeah, it looks pretty wet down there. Anyway, and at some point he lost his diaper, so he's wandering around playing with his push toy, I guess, and spilling water all over the floor. Interesting kid. Tertiary circular reaction develop between the 12th and the 18th month. The infant starts exploring the properties of its environment, and it's looking for stimulation. And of course, this baby, he looks like the devil, but of course, that's just the way people's eyes are. He's getting a real kick out of making noise on the organ. Internalization of schemes occurs between the 18th and 24th month. The child begins using symbols such as language to communicate. And now we're going to talk about, no, not yet. Between the 4th and the 8th month, the baby will develop an understanding that just because someone or something is not there, it isn't gone. This is known as object permanence. As you can see, this baby wants to play with the chicken, and here they cover the chicken up and the baby stops looking for the chicken. As the baby gets a little bit older, this is a 9-month-old. Here the baby wants to play with the chicken. They hide the chicken from the baby, and the baby is still looking for it, so she goes right through the blanket and finds her chicken. This is a 4-month-old, and this is a 9-month-old down here. It's not the same kid. Okay. At about 18 months, most toddlers will begin to talk and gesture. Words and gestures are examples of the first stage of abstract thinking, the use of symbols. Children begin to engage in pretend play, and waving becomes sign language for goodbye. And that's what's going on here. He's got something in his sack, and they've got it tied up so that it won't spill out. And there he is saying bye-bye to somebody anyway. Language is made up of individual sounds that are put together to make words that have meaning. These sounds are called phonemes, each individual sound, and we're going to go through these in just a second. There are about 44 in the English language, depending on where you live. And it really has to do with vowel sounds. Some areas of the country, some select individuals will use more vowel sounds than others. Southerners are big on adding extra vowels. My son's name was Chris, and my daughter used to call him Chris. Creates. She used to put two I's in there, as interesting as that was, especially when she was mad at him. She called him Chris. Anyway, and sometimes people put extra vowels into words, just to prolong the word, I guess. And now we're going to go through all the English phonemes. Right here. There we go.
The key sounds of English. 44 phonemes and 4 blends. 18 consonant phonemes. Five consonant digraph phonemes. J, ch, sh, and 16 vowel phonemes. A, E, I, A, E, E, I, O, U, ow, oi, ah, aw, 5 R-controlled phonemes. R, or, air, ear. 4 blends. Ear, you, or, and here they all are. Oh, good.
There you go, all of them. My speaker's going out on my computer, and I'm not sure what you guys heard, the bad speaker or not. So I'll have to go back over and find out if that makes any sense. What you just heard. When we put phonemes together, if the sounds we put together communicate, they're words or morphemes. A morpheme is the smallest unit of meaning. Carport has two morphemes, the car and port. Carport would be someplace where you put your car, a port for your car. So there's two meanings to that word, carport. Roper has two morphemes, rope and The is somebody who does it in this case. So we have two morphemes in roper. Sequence of early language development. As physical structures mature, children are able to make more and more sounds. Neuronal connections necessary to associate sound and meaning become activated. Social interaction with adults introduces babies to the communicative nature of speech. There is a sequence to speech. Prelinguistic speech is where the child makes noises, but they don't really mean anything. The first thing that they will do is coo. Cooing is where they're making vowel sounds, and all these sounds are in in your mouth, in the middle of your mouth. As weird as that sounds. So A, E, I, O, U. Those are all vowel sounds. So the interesting thing is, if you listen to your baby when they're 3 or 4 months old, they will be cooing, and the sounds that they're making are not vowel sounds. What they're making are They're not consonant sounds. They're vowel sounds. Then they will start adding consonant sounds. And this is known as babbling. Ba, ka, ka, ta, ta, ba, 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 ba. And this is when they first will say mama and dada. Before they're just making vowel sounds. But as soon as they start putting consonant sounds with the vowel sounds, now the baby can say mama or dada. Now the interesting thing about mama and dada is that a baby using, remember, everything in the development is proximo-distal, so it's from the inside out. And so dada, which is said with your tongue against your palate, is a sound. The duh sound is something that you can make before you make the sound, because that is your lips. Everything is proximo-distal, so it's from inside out. So a baby who is uh, if mom is trying to get the baby to say mama and daddy's trying to get the baby to say dada, the baby probably will say dada before he says mama, only because it's proximal distal. The inside works before the inside of the mouth works before the lips are going to work. Anyway, that's prelinguistic speech. Linguistic speech, the baby will use a word to mean a sentence, and this is known as a hollow phrase. And then telegraphic speech is where they leave out. They'll say get ball instead of I'm going to get the ball. That's telegraphic speech. In the old days, when people used to send messages by telegraph, they cut out all the extraneous words that they possibly could. So telegraphic speech is like somebody speaking over the telegraph, because they didn't want to spend, buku dollars uh, paying for all the words that they were using. You had to pay by the word. So telegraphic speech would be coming home instead of I am coming home, or whatever might say otherwise. And hollow phrase is where a word stands for a whole sentence. Children learn language quite rapidly, a process referred to as fast mapping. One reason is because a parent tends to try to teach their child words by labeling objects when they are both looking at the item. This is known as joint attention, and this is an example. Here's a little girl, and I've lost my arrow. Anyway, there's a little girl looking at the glass, and she's going to say glass, and mom's going to say glass, and then the little girl's going to say glass. They're both looking at the same thing, and they're both paying attention to the same thing. Chomsky, this is Noam Chomsky, suggested an inborn language acquisition device, or an LAD, programs children's brain to analyze the language they hear and to figure out its rules. This is known as nativism, and not everybody believes in his theory that there is a language acquisition device. It seems to be there. All children seem to be able to learn languages unless they uh, have problems with autism or other speech problems. Some children have hearing problems, and therefore can't. They don't hear the sounds properly. I had a neighbor whose child had it wasn't really congenital, but kid had otitis media, and it was a constant thing. They couldn't get rid of it. They put tubes in, and it didn't really drain the pus out of his middle ear. So here this kid is 4 or 5 years old, and he still can't really speak. He speaks all the sounds that he makes are made with a really interesting lisp. And what was going on was he was hearing everything through this glob of mucus in his ear, in both ears actually. Um, and of course, if he had had one ear that was relatively clear, that would have been would have been okay. Now the odd thing was that the otitis media wasn't causing him any discomfort, but it had impact. It was had impacted inside his eardrum, or on the yeah on the other side of his eardrum. Anyway, he couldn't talk. It was really kind of interesting. And this was I was in the military at the time, and uh, we kept talking to them about it. What had happened was this was her baby, and she had two other kids, and by the time she got to number three, she decided that she was kind of tired of taking care of the kid. So what she did, she didn't want to breastfeed him. She put him. She'd lay him down with a bottle, and the bottle would drip into his ear, and it was just a constant problem. He also had atopic dermatitis um, on his face. And he was 2 or 3 years old. He was still suffering from all these things, and he wasn't. He was still on a pacifier at age 3. You know, those kinds of things. It was really an interesting situation, and so I babysat him one day for some reason. I can't remember what it was. I think the mother had gone to town with my wife, and the father was one of those macho guys who couldn't take care of kids. So I took care of him, and I was the one that figured out what his problem was. And then they went to the doctor, and they were going to send him to a speech therapist. And I don't know why nobody had looked at his eardrums or had even thought about. Well, they had thought about it because they tried to put the tubes in, and it just didn't work. So they took him back, and he had an operation where they opened up his ears, and they were able to pull out all that mucus, and evidently there was quite a bit, and some of it had impacted. Anyway, then they resealed his eardrums, and everything was fine, and he started talking. He still talked with an interesting lisp, and I'm not really. Um, that was kind of at the end of our tour, so we didn't really get to see him too much after that. But anyway, left hemisphere seems to be a critical portion of the brain for learning language. No other primate can learn language but humans. Language acquisition must take place before the age of 12, or it only takes place with much effort and incompletely. First attempts to communicate at 10 months. After the first birthday, the child will engage in conversation with adults where they're babbling and it sounds like they're talking. And actually, what they're doing is singing the music of the language that they speak. So it sounds like they're actually talking, though, and they will ask questions. And these are all nonsense. It's like me clacking away on a typewriter, just playing with the typewriter and just hitting the keys, and they're doing exactly the same thing. As a child ages, they're not playing on a typewriter, of course, but they're pronouncing words that don't actually exist. As a child ages, the language skills improves and the vocabulary will grow. And as we will see, vocabulary can grow to thousands, tens of thousands of words, very relatively rapidly. Children simplify language. Children over-regularize the rules. They apply them rigidly, but not knowing that some rules have exceptions. Children understand grammatical relationships they cannot yet express. Children underextend word meanings. And as you can see, this is a joke. When comforting a grammar Nazi, I always say softly, there. And those are the three spellings of there. Children simplify language, all dry, hit ball. This would be telegraphic speech. They simplify language. They apply them rigidly, not knowing that some rules have exceptions. I played with toy. I go to store. Of course, there are exceptions to our English language, a very difficult language to learn if you don't already know English. If you don't grow up with English, it's not that easy to learn. Children understand grammatical relationships they cannot yet express. I like you. When the world is mine, your death shall be quick and painless. Of course, that's I don't watch that cartoon, but evidently this is a brainiac baby that wants to take over the world. Children underextend word meanings. Tanya won't let anyone else call their father daddy because that is what she calls her father. So nobody else can use that term. They overextend word meanings. Melissa calls all animals doggy because that is what her mother taught her to call their dog. And of course, that means all moving, all animate objects become doggies. I tease my grandson. He's 8, so it's not much of a tease. But every time I see his cat, I call it a doggy, and he just thinks that's. Oh, he used to think it was funny. I guess it's the joke's getting kind of old at this point. And actually, his mother was one of the his mother was kind of like 50 years old when she was born, so she took everything fairly literally, and all you needed to do was correct her one time, and she picked it right up on it. She potty trained after being told that she needed to sit on the potty if she needed to go to the bathroom. It only took one time. My son, still not sure he's potty trained, but my daughter, she potty trained really fast. So she learned really fast. Reading aloud to your child allows for opportunities for emotional intimacy and parent-child communication. Children who are read to often have better language skills at age 2, 4, and 5, and better reading comprehension at age 7. And of course, that's something I did with my children, and that's something my daughter has done with her son. Whenever he's here, somebody gets to read to him. According to Erickson, this is from his book from 1950, early experiences are the key to developing either trust or mistrust. Sensitive, responsive, consistent caregiving leads to trust. Mistrust is developed when the infant's basic needs are not met, and then they cry. This is what you want your baby to do. You want your baby, I don't know what in the world is that baby got over there. Anyway, you want your baby to, oh, those are books. Sorry, I'm saying all these dangerous things. And of course, you want your baby to smile and not to cry. Autonomy versus shame and doubt leads to a shift from external to self-control. Negativism is the tendency to shout no just for the sake of resisting authority, and that's what children will do. Starting about age 1.5, maybe 2 years old, and they just you tell them to do something and they don't want to do it. Time to eat supper. No, I don't like that food. That's that kind of a thing. This is the terrible twos. Negativism may hit another peak between 3.5 and 4, but will usually decline before entering school. So they're usually okay. They're not telling the teacher no, or whoever it is. Birth to 6 to 8 weeks. This has to do with pre-attachment. Evolution has endowed a baby with many behaviors that elicit caregiving from the adult. They cry, they smile, they gaze intently into the parent's face. Now remember, the baby doesn't see very well, so what all the baby is actually seeing is a smiley face. They can't really. They can identify you by your smell, especially if you're a caregiver, mom or dad, and somebody that picks them up all the time. They can tell their brothers and sisters, especially if they pay attention to them very much, but they can't see very well. The parent responds by holding and cuddling the baby, of course. Anytime the baby cries, they try to pick them up. When they smile, they try to tease them and make them smile. They try to say things to them. They play with their mouths. They rub their cheeks. All kinds of interesting things happen. And I need to answer the telephone. I'll be right back. She's not here right now. Could I take a message or have her call you? I'm here, but I'm on a Zoom meeting, so I got to hang up. This creates an interactive system. Sorry about that. I got a call from Doctors Without Borders. This creates an interactive system and is the first step in attachment. So this is the pre-attachment phase. The baby is endearing themselves to the parents, and that's what happens. 6 to 8 weeks to 6 to 8 months. The next stage is the attachment stage. I'm sorry, it's the attachment in the making stage. Babies start to recognize the act of differently, to act differently around familiar and unfamiliar caregivers. They hug mom, they hug dad, they hug sissy, they hug their brothers, anybody that they're used to. Grandma, the first time she comes over, she's been living 150 miles away, and this is the first time she's ever been able to see the baby. The baby probably won't go right to her because she's unfamiliar. So it'll take a while for the baby to get used to the mother or to the grandmother. They attach themselves to primary caregivers and they cling to them when they are in distress and in mock distress. Babies are this way sometimes. They act like they're in distress when they're not. 6 to 8 months to 18 months, by the 7th or 8th month, the child has usually singled out one of their caregivers as their favorite. It's usually their mother, but it doesn't have to be their mother. Sometimes mothers suffer from postpartum depression. In that case, then sometimes the child will want to be around somebody that is a little bit more positive. The mother does take care of them a lot, maybe more than dad, and they pay more attention to them than their brothers or sisters. But it doesn't have to be mom. It doesn't even have to be dad. It can be one of the brothers or sisters. It can be the next door neighbor that babysits them. It can be anybody. Can be their favorite caregiver. The child will use the mother as a base to explore from. The baby trusts the mother to be there whenever they need them. It's not uncommon for a mom not to be their favorite. In my case, my wife wasn't really a baby person, so when I was home, I got to take care of the kids if I wasn't working. So I took care of them. I worked 8 to 10 hours a day. This is when I was in the service. I was working 8 to 10 hours a day, and the rest of the time I got to take care of them. I got to bathe them. I got to feed them, except for my son who was breastfed. Anyway, so I was both of the kids' favorites, and that may be one of the reasons why. When she left when my son was 9 months old, when my wife left when she was 9 months old, it wasn't that traumatic for either of the children because their favorite caregiver was still there. So it's not like they didn't miss their mother. It's just that um, there was already somebody there that they liked to play with more than their mom. She was kind of grouchy. 18 months and older, the ever-expanding cognitive and language skills of the child call for more and more interaction between the child and the parent. The child will and should take the initiative to initiate these interactions. Negotiation often takes place, and of course this is known as a reciprocal relationship between the parent or the caregiver and the child. There is a strong relationship between a father's close involvement with his baby and the baby's development. The father's involvement in caregiving has increased by 1/3 in a single generation. 1/4 of the U.S. fathers take care of their preschool age children while the mother works, and nearly 1/5 are their primary caregivers of the children. This wasn't the way it was when I was when I was raising my kids. They're one's 51 and the other's 48. It wasn't really that way back then. This was the late 60s, early 70s. Things were a little bit different back then. Fathers were still supposed to be secondary caregivers, if at all. My dad didn't really spend a lot of time with us. I mean, that's the way we were raised. My mother said that her mother wouldn't allow her father to spend very much time with the children. She said it wasn't right. Anyway, U.S. fathers tend to play with their children in a more physical style though this is not common in other countries. And everybody has their own traditions, of course. And this is how men act. And in some cultures, men aren't supposed to wash anything. They're not allowed. They can't sew anything. They're not supposed to cook. But of course, I wasn't raised that way. And since my wife left when my son was 9 months old, when she left when he was 9 months old, and my daughter was about 2.5 years old. So I became the only caregiver, and I learned. I already knew how to cook, and I already knew how to wash clothes, and I already knew how to. What else do you do? Sew. I knew how to sew. Um, with a needle and thread. I couldn't use a sewing machine, but I used to be able to mend things anyway. So anyway, and she wouldn't mend anything. She was kind of an interesting person. She could cook and she could wash the dishes or whatever. But yeah, we did okay. We all survived. I was a single parent for 5 years. So is that right? Yeah. Well, she kind of left and came back about 9 months later, and then she left again after a couple months. It was really kind of an odd situation. And of course, when we talk about drug use and abuse, I'll explain to you why she was going back and forth. Forms of attachment, ways of developing attachment. Attachment is a reciprocal, enduring emotional tie between the caregiver and the baby. There's 4 different types of attachment. This is according to Bowlby and Ainsworth. They identified 4 different types of attachment. Secure attachment: the baby greets the mom happily when she returns. The baby is secure because the baby knows that the mother is going to be there, or the caregiver is going to be there when after she leaves. And this has to do with trust versus mistrust. Avoidant attachment: the baby avoids the mom when she returns, almost like she's punishing the parent. In ambivalent, resistant attachment, the baby's anxious even before the mother leaves. The baby is ambivalent when she returns. In other words, she's in a mistrust phase stage. She isn't sure if the mother's going to be there. Then when she does come back, she doesn't really pay any attention to her. Disorganized, disoriented attachment: inconsistent, contradictory behavior. In these cases, especially the disorganized, disoriented attachment, mothers tend to be insensitive, intrusive, or abusive. A lot of times, this has to do with the mother suffering from postpartum depression, in which case from time to time, they will not develop a secure attachment to the child. Erickson and other theorists feel that the infant-parent relationship lays a foundation for all later social relationships. Therefore, a child who experiences a secure relationship with their parents will be able to maintain this pattern of attachment throughout their lives. Insecure attachments may lead to other problems for the child due to the problems in the parent-child relationships. Maltreatment will cause insecure attachments and parental mental illness where the parent doesn't pay proper attention to the child. And of course, later on in life, somebody with a secure attachment, they can develop a secure attachment to a significant other. The insecure attachment, these individuals tend to bounce from one relationship to the other, not wanting to make a commitment to the relationship. And of course, we can talk about this right now if you like. This may be one of the reasons why there are men who are relationship phobic. They don't want to make a commitment. They're commitment phobic, I guess. And this has to do with the fact that female children tend to be treated better by the parents. Males and females are treated differently in our societies. Females are Males are treated as being more independent, and females are treated to be more dependent. And it's a lot easier for mom to get close to the daughters, for a dad to get close to the daughters. He's allowed to do that. He has to make a man out of his son. So there is a lot more. There's less affection. Tends to be less affection with the males than with the females. And this is just something that has been going on for a while, especially in the older days, in the Victorian era, and right after World War II and World War One, and after the Vietnam War, things changed a little bit, but for the most part. Daughters are treated far differently than sons are treated, and one of the problems with that is males tend to be more insecure than females, as sad as that is. And of course, we can talk about this all day long. We're talking about averages here. In your family, everybody was loved equally, and that's fine. That's wonderful, but not all families treat their children the same. So, so when we're talking about relationship commitment phobia, then that may be one of the reasons, one of the problems uh, with males. Researchers have determined that secure attachment is most likely to occur when parents are responsive and sensitive. Babies who have difficult temperaments are less likely to develop secure attachment. Unfortunately, these difficult children do not elicit positive treatment from their parents. Research shows that these mothers can be trained to give their children the type of treatment that they need, and of course, this takes a psychologist to be able to do this. Newborns are able to demonstrate their unhappiness by crying, flailing their arms, and stiffening their bodies. When babies need something, they cry. When they are feeling sociable, they smile or laugh. When their emotions are responded to, they react in a similar manner when the emotion occurs again. Smiling occurs spontaneously soon after birth, but is usually not tied to anything specific. Remember, the baby can't see very well. Spontaneous smiling slowly decreases over the first 3 months. Responsive smiling begins the second week to stimulation, usually feeding. By the third week, the infant smiles in response to voices and faces. Social smiling begins at about 1 month. Laughing begins in the fourth month to stimulation. And who knows what makes a baby laugh? We know that when they have a bowel movement in their britches, that makes them smile, or when they have to pass gas, that can make them smile too. So be careful what you wish for. Researchers have discovered that babies can show joy, sadness, interest, and fear at birth. Later, they show anger, surprise, and disgust depending on the amount of emotional stimulation and the emotional display their caregivers have shown them. Body movement is also a good way of reading a baby's emotion, turning the body away, turning the gaze away. Babies rarely react negatively to strangers before 6 months of age. They don't see well enough yet. They really can't identify people that well. They know their primary caregivers, but they can't really see very well. Many children react more negatively to strangers around their 8th or 9th month, though it gradually decreases to their first year. Babies are less likely to act negatively if mothers speak positively of the individual and they approach the baby slowly and playfully. And of course, this baby doesn't like being handed over to anybody. He just wants mom to hold him. Now, mom's reacting kind of funny. I need to find my arrow here. There's my arrow. Okay. Okay. Mom's reacting kind of funny. She thinks it's funny that the baby is reacting negatively. I worked with a lady, and she thought it was funny that her baby, that her female, that her daughter didn't like men, which she thought was the funniest thing in the world. So anytime the baby got anywhere close to a man, the baby would start crying, and she would laugh. What she was doing was conditioning the child to react negatively to men. Even the father, she had conditioned the child to react positively to women and negatively to men. And the baby would cry. And well, we won't go into one day, one time. There was another lady working working for me. Actually, I was in charge of the section, and she was working for me. And she brought her baby in, and she gave the baby to this lady, and this lady didn't really like kids very much, and she kind of held her really tight, really stiff, and of course it hurt the baby, and the baby kind of started crying, and then he tried to grab a hold of the woman, and she just kind of held him away from her body. And I came up and I took the baby. I didn't really take the baby away. I just said, "Come here," and I wanted to hold the baby and comfort the child. And what happened was the baby started crying because I had a hold of her, and she didn't actually stop crying until the mother came over, and then she said, "Well, she doesn't like men," and of course you could tell from the crying she was crying because she was hurt when the other lady was holding her, and she was crying because it was more a scared cry than anything else. It wasn't a pain cry like she was crying with the other woman. So with the woman, and so the mother came over, and when she got a hold of her, the baby stopped crying, of course, and then she wanted to come to me, and when she came to me, she started crying again. Anyway, it had to do with the fact that the mother had conditioned this child to cry whenever she was around males, as strange as that was. She didn't want to cry when the lady held her, even though the lady was squeezing her kind of tight and not cuddling her. And I did cuddle her, and so she was crying because of because of fear, I guess, which was kind of interesting. Anyway, that's has to do with strangers. While most children worldwide express the same basic and complex emotions, in some cultures emotional expression is encouraged and in others it isn't. Research comparing American children with Chinese children showed that at 11 months, American children cried and smiled more than 11-month-old Chinese children, because Chinese children are conditioned not to react in an emotional way, but American children are. When American children are given awards where they stand out, they feel proud and in their personal achievement. In China, the same situation would elicit embarrassment and shame. The situation would be celebrated by honoring the entire class or even the entire school. If someone takes something from an American child, they are more likely to show anger. In Buddhist countries, a child rarely shows anger for any reason whatsoever. One of the basic means of surviving in a social world is to take cues for our behavior from others. Children begin doing this at birth, and we all continue it when we are in an unfamiliar or ambiguous situation. This is shown as social referencing. This may be one reason why children often mimic their parents' phobias. As children get older, they begin regulating their own emotion. A child is more likely to try to deal with their own fear as they get older than seek assistance. Children will use mental strategies to manage emotions, talking to themselves in order to control unwanted feelings. Not all children are able to regulate their emotions, and the ones who struggle tend to have problems interacting with others. Through the first year, children have been playing with their own toys. They will allow older people to play with them, but they don't really play well with their peers. About age 1, the child begins to be able to play alongside a peer who is playing with a similar toy or in a similar manner. The child will monitor each other's play. The children will monitor each other's play, but they won't play with each other. And this is known as parallel play, and that's what's going on here. This is an Etch-a-Sketch, and I'm not sure what that is. It's some other way of drawing on things. Anyway, they're playing near each other, and they're playing with similar toys, but they're not really playing together. And that's known as parallel play. As children approach their second birthday, they will begin playing together in a more organized fashion. In this play, they will accept specialized roles, and the play will follow specific themes. This type of play is referred to as cooperative play, and that's what's going on here. These children are kind of playing with each other, but not really playing with each other. Between the 15th and the 18th month mark, children will begin engaging in similar activities and talk and smile with one another while this takes place. This is known as simple social play, and that's what's going on here. They're kind of playing together, but not really. As the children become older, their cooperative play becomes more and more intricate. Children will start using their imaginary themes in their play and will incorporate items they may take on some that may take on some quite imaginary characteristics. This is referred to as symbolic play. I'm guessing something's going on here. This is mom, and this is the baby, and this is the nurse. I'm not sure. That looks like a tomato to me, and she's got a knife. I think she's about to cut the tomato, and there's mom watching. Now this is some Coke, I guess, and that's a sandwich. These are all toys. There's a baby bottle, and there's the nurse, of course. I'm not going to guess what's going on, but we got a nurse, we got a mom, and we got a baby, so that's kind of interesting. Researchers have discovered that symbolic play follows cultural precepts. American children tend to engage in more adventure and fantasy play, while Korean children play following more traditional values, family themes with harmony more important than conflict. And of course, anytime I can remember playing with my sister, and anytime I was playing with my sister, I always wanted to fight in a war. And anytime she played, she wanted to be mommy and me be the daddy, or either me be the daddy or me be the child or whatever. And I'm always wanting to go off to war. Anyway, we hardly ever played with each other because we couldn't. I'm always trying to go to war, and she was always trying to not go to war. And that is the end of the chapter. So there you go. Talk to you guys next week. Next week we'll tackle chapter 5.